This is another Read Me Something reward for Reich E. Spore's Patreon. We are reading from my Oz-based novel, Polychrome, Chapter 56. She is alive. She is alive, and she is beside me on the rainbow, and she loves me. She loves me. She loves me. For a time I could not measure. I had no room in my mind or heart for any other thought or feeling except the utter, incredulous, and perfect joy of a literal dream come true, of a fantasy held for decades that had proven, in the end, to be far more than I had imagined. I remembered a line from one of the Narnia books, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, about the smell and the song at the end of the world. It would break your heart. Why? Was it so sad? Sad? No! I had never quite understood what sort of feeling that could be. Now I did, for I was filled to bursting with a joy that I could not imagine I could contain, and tears kept flowing from my eyes because there were no smiles or laughter that could adequately express what I felt. But at last I looked up from those perfect violet storm eyes and beheld the glory of the Rainbow Castle, and realized that we had traveled the entire length of the rainbow without my even realizing it. And by her startled look I realized Polychrome, too, had lost all track of time, and I laughed aloud for the sheer amazement and wonder of it, that I could in any way, in any imaginable way, be the focus of such attention. "By such a laugh I know you are healed, Eric Meadon," Ozma said, gently laughing herself. "It is well. Truly would it have been a steep price to pay that our Savior be broken in the moment of his triumph." I turned and suddenly stopped dead in my tracks, staring. I hadn't realized how many were following us and who they were, and I knew then that I had been wrong, that it was possible for me to feel more wonder and joy than I already did, for they were there, all of them. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, Dorothy and Glinda, the Cowardly Lion and Scraps the Patchwork Girl, the Wizard of Oz himself, some not quite like their illustrations, but more themselves, even as Ugu had been more than the simple caricature of an impotent villain. And for a moment I simply could not speak. There were so many things I wanted to say and do and think, and I found myself on my knees again, crying and unable to stop, and Polly asking me what was wrong, and I just took her hand and shook my head, and though I was blushing crimson, I couldn't stop the tears. Another hand covered hers. "Nothing's wrong, Polly," Dorothy said, with a smile and tears in her own eyes. "Believe me, I know what he's feeling, at least some of it. Couldn't talk very much myself when I knew I'd come back to Oz to stay. Add that to you coming back to him. Poor man's just got to have too much happiness for one person to say." I met her gaze and saw she did understand, as she'd say, just 'bout exactly. I smiled and nodded again and took a deep breath. "Princess Dorothy Gale." I stood and bowed. "You're right. It was all just too much. Still is. I love Polychrome more than anything." I looked to her again, just reassuring myself she was really there, alive. "But I've loved all of Oz, all of Fairy, for just as long." "And I understand perhaps more even than Princess Dorothy," the Wizard said with a smile, and I thought a suspiciously bright sparkle in his own eyes. "You no doubt understand that my return to Oz, to confront the princess I had betrayed, was nowhere near as simple as Baum painted it. And so you can realize my own joy when I was, in the end, welcomed home." He leaned a bit closer and in a lower voice said, "And as a man, I can very well understand the rest." I hoped Polychrome liked the sensitive, blushing sort of guy because it seemed I was awfully prone to that. Suddenly another voice, deep voice like thunder, shouted out, "Polychrome!" And Iris Mirabilis was there sprinting from the mighty gates of the fortress, somehow smaller but still immense as he caught up his daughter and swung her around, his own face not entirely dry. "Thank all of the above. You are alive." Then he turned to me and, in front of all assembled on the rainbow, knelt and bowed to the very ground. "My thanks, all the thanks of Fairy, to you, Eric Menon." I looked down at the top of his head and waited a moment. "Thank you, Iris Mirabilis," I said finally, and he raised his head. "Yes," I said in answer to the unspoken question. "I was royally pissed at you when I finally understood what was going on. And if she were not alive—" I realized my eyes must have gone terribly cold because I saw understanding in his. I pushed my hair back from my face, for some reason it seemed to be dropping over my eyes more, and drew another breath. But that is what might have been, and I won't waste more time on it. We all paid prices for this war, none more than the soldiers on both sides who died, and they are gone. The thought struck me, and I turned to Ozma. Unless whatever brought back Polly? Alas, no. It was Ruggedo, and I turned to him in surprise. He raised his eyebrow, then chuckled. "So deep in your grief were you, that your powers of observation failed to even note that it was I, not Ozma, who was able to return life to Polychrome." Iris' eyes narrowed. "That is virtually impossible. It requires the power and the tolerance of the above, and the price is—" "I know the price. None better, Iris. And the power was returned to me by those who had taken it, and most justly so, in centuries past." Now I realized that Ruggedo was wearing the magic belt, the wishing belt, the belt that had held the vast majority of the powers of the Gnome Kingdom. But as I looked, I could see that while it still blazed with gems of all sorts, fully half the settings were empty, their gems shattered and dull. That was the cost? Ruggedo nodded, but his smile did not fade. "A small price indeed. After all, I had long since given up any hope of ever holding my belt again. What matter, then, that it has lost much of its power now? I still have far more than I did when first we met. Far, far more, I think, even had the belt been destroyed entirely for my temerity in using the gift of the above to flout their law." The old gnome shook his head violently. "I will take no thanks or intimations of a debt from you, my friend. I paid what I owed, as best I could. And as I said, I think I still have the bargain." He looked at Iris Mirabilis. "Now your thanks I shall accept, Lord of the Rainbow. And you shall have them, and more besides." He looked back to me, having risen now to his full height, and saw as Polychrome took my hand again and smiled. He raised his arms in a welcoming gesture. "Enter the Rainbow Kingdom, friends and allies, for today Fairy is free." His gaze flicked across the crowd, and I saw it suddenly halt and his face go first pale and then dark. "What is the meaning of this?" I didn't have to turn, though I did, to know what he was looking at. I didn't remember exactly what had gone on afterwards, but I knew that I hadn't killed Ugu, and no one else was likely to have tried. Ozma stepped between Ugu and Iris as the Rainbow Lord started forward. "Ugu the Unbound has been defeated, and in his words I have heard some faint hope that he is not beyond reason. His life was spared by your very champion, and in doing so he fulfilled your prophecy to the very end. So it is that his final fate is neither in your hands nor in mine, but in those of Eric Medon, for it was he, not you nor I, who defeated the usurpers and freed us all. I noted Ugu's surprise, which I rather echoed, that Ozma used Ugu's self-chosen title. I was also startled that they were lobbing that ball back into my court, and despite the euphoria that still sang through my veins, I realized a deadly serious issue waiting for me. I will not make that decision immediately, that's for sure. I need a clear head to judge someone like that. Iris opened his mouth as though to argue, then looked down at me, closed his mouth, and finally gave a short bow. As the Princess of Oz directs, so it shall be. Still, I would have someone be responsible for his actions and watch over him. I will do that. Zenga stepped forward. His strength isn't the equal of mine. He's just about out of magical tricks, and I really don't think he's looking for any more trouble. Ugu said nothing, though he did nod at the last. I suspected he figured it was best to keep his mouth shut even when it came to agreeing, and he was probably right. 3 centuries and more of fear will make just about anyone irrational. So be it, Iris agreed finally. He turned to the assembled masses and spread his arms wide again, gesturing us forward. Welcome again, and well done to you all, and especially to our hero. We will thank him in true royal style tonight. All of us. The responding roar of agreement nearly deafened me. Oh, geez, I'm in trouble now, I whispered to Polly. She giggled and pushed that annoying lock of hair out of the way as she leaned closer. You certainly are. Gnomes and the storm guards throwing a party in the Rainbow Castle? This won't be over for a week, and you'll have to be there all the time. I shuddered but kissed her cheek, marveling once more that I could do that. Is it too late for us to say I fell heroically in battle?